The notification pinged a simple sound that usually blended into the background hum of my dorm room. But this time, it felt different. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked open the email. The subject line, a blinding beacon. Congratulations, National Youth Innovators Forum selection. I scanned the first few lines, my breath catching. It wasn't just an acceptance. It was a full scholarship, a speaking slot, a chance to present my environmental tech project in Chicago, in front of people who could actually help make it a reality. This was it. The culmination of late nights, endless research, and a quiet dream I'd nurtured in the shadows of my small hometown. A dream I wasn't sure anyone else in my family truly understood. A wave of euphoria washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. For a fleeting moment, the world felt limitless, but then, a familiar chill crept in. A tiny voice whispering a warning I knew all too well. That warning had a name. Jessica, my older sister. To the outside world, Jessica was golden. Captain of the debate team, strata student. Already accepted into a prestigious pre-law program our parents constantly raved about. She had this way of smiling, a bright, dazzling thing that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. Especially when I had something fragments of memories, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at my mind. My award-winning 8th grade science project, a miniature ecosystem I'd poured weeks into, mysteriously toppling off a high shelf the night before the state fair. A shelf Jessica had helped me organize just hours earlier. Then there was the accidental coffee spill, a dark stain blooming across my nearly completed application for a summer arts program. The one Jessica had casually dismissed as a waste of time. And who could forget my prom dress, a beautiful, vintage find, suddenly developing a series of unexplainable snags right after Jessica borrowed it just to see how it looked. Each incident was brushed off by our parents as my own carelessness or bad luck. "You need to be more responsible, Alex," became their constant refrain, a chorus that always seemed to absolve Jessica of any wrongdoing. But I knew, deep down, that these weren't random accidents. They were tiny, calculated acts of sabotage, pinpricks, designed to deflate my hopes before they could even take flight. It wasn't just Jessica. It was the air in our house, thick with unspoken comparisons. My parents, bless their hearts, probably thought they were being fair. But fair often translated to a meticulously kept scoreboard of Jessica's achievements, plastered on the fridge, while my own small victories, a poem published in the school literary magazine, a lead role in a community theater play, were met with a polite nod before the conversation inevitably drifted back to Jessica's latest debate triumph or her flawless GPA. "Oh, that's nice, honey," Mom would say, her eyes already glazing over. "Did you hear Jessica just got nominated for student council president?" It was like living with a permanent spotlight on my sister, and I was just a figure lingering in the dim periphery. The silence surrounding my passions, my efforts, was louder than any criticism. These were the unseen walls, built not of brick and mortar, but of casual dismissals and deflected attention, making me feel like an outsider in my own home, a guest at their carefully curated family portrait. My dreams felt too fragile to share, too easily crushed under the weight of their indifference. The weeks leading up to the National Youth Innovators Forum were a blur of frantic energy and hopeful anticipation. I was fine-tuning my presentation, a sleek animation showcasing my eco-friendly water filtration system, a project I believed could genuinely make a difference. Liam had even helped me build a compact, working prototype. Everything was finally falling into place. The forum organizers had sent a final confirmation email with a critical upload link for my presentation, files and a strict deadline just 48 hours away. I'd saved the email, flagged it, practically memorized its contents. Then, the unthinkable happened. I came back to my dorm room after a late-night study session with Liam, my laptop left open on my desk. The screen was dark, but a faint, sickly, sweet smell, like burnt sugar, hung in the air. My stomach lurched. I tried to power it on. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. My entire presentation, all the source files, the animation, the research notes, everything was on that laptop. Jessica had been in my room earlier, ostensibly to borrow a textbook she urgently needed for a class she wasn't even taking this semester. I remembered her lingering a little too long near my desk. At that moment, staring at the dead screen, the culmination of years of her subtle sabotage, her feigned innocence, her accidents, all crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't carelessness. This was targeted. This was her. My future, meticulously planned, and so close I could almost taste it, had just been snuffed out with a spilled latte or a faulty power cord, and I knew exactly who was holding the empty cup. My first instinct, born more out of desperation than hope, was to call home. My voice trembled as I explained what happened, the dead laptop, the looming deadline. Silence met me on the other end, heavy and suffocating, before Mom finally spoke. "Oh, Alex. Honey, that's terrible," she said, her tone laced with a practiced, almost theatrical sympathy. "But you know how you can be with electronics, always a bit forgetful about plugging things in correctly. Or maybe you downloaded something you shouldn't have." Jessica's voice chirped in on the extension, dripping with false concern. "Oh, poor Alex. That's just awful luck. Maybe it's a sign, you know? Like, maybe this whole Chicago thing is just too much pressure right now." Dad chimed in, his voice firm, authoritative. "Well, these things happen, Alexandra. It's a good lesson in responsibility and making backups. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be. Don't dwell on it. Jessica has her regional debate finals next week, and we all need to focus on supporting her." Not a single question about how I was feeling, not a flicker of outrage on my behalf. Just a swift pivot to my sister's achievements and a thinly veiled accusation of my own incompetence. The concern in their voices was a suffocating blanket, designed to muffle my anger and my pain. I hung up, the dial tone droning in my ear like a funeral dirge. The four walls of my dorm room, once a haven of creativity, now felt like a shrinking prison. Every path forward seemed barricaded, the deadline was a ticking time bomb. My work was a ghost on a dead machine. And the people who were supposed to be my biggest supporters had just handed me a shovel and told me to bury my dreams deeper. What was the point? What was the point of fighting so hard when the universe, or at least my small corner of it, seemed so determined to see me fail? Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe it was a sign. A wave of exhaustion, heavier than any I'd ever known, washed over me. The fight just drained out of me, leaving behind a hollow ache and the quiet, seductive whisper of surrender. For the first time, giving up didn't feel like a failure. It felt like the only sensible option left. I was still curled up on my bed, the silence of the room amplifying my despair, when a sharp knock echoed. It was Liam, my perpetually optimistic, slightly chaotic best friend, barging in with a container of what smelled suspiciously like my favorite triple chocolate cookies. "Heard you had a tech meltdown," he said, his usual grin faltering a little when he saw my face. I just nodded, fresh tears threatening. "And let me guess," he continued, settling beside me. "Jessica offered her deepest sympathies while simultaneously suggesting you take up pottery instead." His uncanny ability to mimic her saccharine tone almost made me smile. "It's not just the laptop, Liam," I mumbled. "It's everything. They think I should just... give up." Liam's easygoing demeanor vanished. "Give up? Alex, are you kidding me? After all this, no way. We are not letting her win. That girl has been pulling these stunts since middle school. Remember when she accidentally submitted your art portfolio to the Math Olympiad?" He paused. Then his eyes lit up. "Wait a minute. Your project files. Didn't you email a draft animation to Ms. Albright last week for feedback?" My head snapped up. Ms. Albright, my former digital arts teacher, now a mentor. A tiny, almost forgotten detail, but it was there, a thread. It wasn't everything, but it wasn't nothing either. Liam was already pulling out his phone. "Let's call her. Right now." Ms. Albright was a lifesaver. She not only had the draft animation but also remembered me mentioning a cloud backup I'd set up for my core research, something I'd completely forgotten in my panic. "Always have a plan B, Alex," she'd said warmly over the phone, "and sometimes, a plan C." While the animation was an older version and some crucial data was still missing, it was a start. But Liam, ever the pragmatist, wasn't satisfied. "Okay, so we have something," he said, pacing my small room. "But how did your laptop just die? That burnt sugar smell you mentioned. That's not normal." He grabbed my dead laptop, examining it closely. Suddenly, he stopped, his eyes fixed on the charging port. "Alex, look at this." He pointed to a tiny, almost invisible discoloration, and a faint stickiness around the port. It was subtle, easily missed if you weren't looking for it. "This looks like soda, or maybe a very sugary coffee, spilled directly into the port while it was charging. Enough to short-circuit the motherboard, make it look like a catastrophic Hardware failure, but not leave an obvious mess. My mind raced back to Jessica, her feigned clumsiness over the years. Could she really be that meticulous, that devious? Then Liam remembered something else. Hey, when Jessica was in here, didn't you say she was on her phone a lot, texting? Maybe she was a little too distracted when she borrowed that textbook and accidentally knocked over her extra-large caramel macchiato right next to your charging laptop. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening lurch. The convenient textbook, her unusual lingering, the accident no one saw. We didn't have a signed confession, but we had a narrative, a chillingly plausible one. And for the first time, my anger started to burn brighter than my despair. The anger simmered, then boiled over into a cold, hard resolve. Jessica wanted to break me, to see me fail. Fine. Game on. Okay, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The original presentation files might be gone. The prototype needs some work without my detailed specs, but that cloud backup Ms. Albright mentioned. It has all my foundational research, the core algorithms for the filtration system, enough to prove the concept. Liam's eyes widened. You're not thinking of, ... I'm not just thinking, Liam, I'm doing. The National Youth Innovators Forum wasn't just about a flashy animation, it was about innovative ideas. My idea was still alive, even if its original packaging was destroyed. The speaking slot is probably lost, I conceded, but there's still. The Emerging Ideas Showcase, a smaller, less formal session, but it's a foot in the door. The deadline for that is tomorrow noon. It means rebuilding a simplified presentation from scratch. Focusing purely on the science and the data, no fancy graphics, just raw innovation. Ms. Albright, when we called her back, not only encouraged the idea but also mentioned she knew one of the junior organizers for the showcase and could at least ensure my late submission would be looked at. It was a long shot, a frantic caffeine-fueled race against time. We worked through the night, Liam deciphering my old notes, me rebuilding charts and summarizing findings, the recovered animation draft playing on a loop for inspiration. By sunrise, a new, leaner, but fiercely potent presentation was taking shape. It wasn't what I had originally envisioned, but it was mine, forged in the fire of betrayal and fueled by a defiant hope. This wasn't just about a scholarship anymore. This was about taking back my voice, my future, piece by painstaking piece. Chicago. The city skyline was a daunting, exhilarating spectacle as my bus pulled into the terminal. The National Youth Innovators Forum was being held in a sprawling convention center, downtown. A universe away from Willow Creek. My heart did a nervous flip. This wasn't just a presentation anymore. It felt like stepping onto a battlefield where my entire future was the prize. Armed with my hastily assembled presentation on a USB drive and a surge of adrenaline, I navigated the crowded registration hall. The air buzzed with 100 different conversations, a kaleidoscope of bright young minds. I found the check-in desk for the Emerging Ideas Showcase, a smaller, slightly less chaotic corner of the main event. Just as I was receiving my name badge, a familiar, overly enthusiastic voice cut through the din. Alex, is that really you, darling? My blood ran cold. There they were, Mom, Dad and Jessica, beaming as if this were some happy family outing. Jessica, looking immaculate in a designer pantsuit, was apparently an invited panelist for a young leaders roundtable. Later that day, a detail she'd conveniently forgotten to mention, we had no idea you were actually coming, Mom exclaimed, her smile a little too wide, a little too bright. The support they'd denied me for my original, hard-won opportunity was now being lavishly offered for this last-minute, cobbled-together attempt. The irony was a bitter pill, but their presence, their unknowing anticipation of witnessing what they probably assumed would be my public stumble, only solidified my resolve. They were here. Good, let them watch. The Emerging Ideas Showcase was in a smaller auditorium, but the expectant hush from the audience felt just as intense. My name was called, and my legs felt like lead as I walked towards the modest podium. Za USB deriber kudachido, asebamu, sahithi e mai pamu. I could see them in the third row, Mom, Dad, and Jessica. Their expressions a mixture of forced politeness and something that looked suspiciously like pity. For a terrifying second, their disbelief, their low expectations, threatened to swallow me whole. I took a shaky breath, placed the USB into the laptop provided, and my presentation, the one forged from resilience, flickered onto the screen. Good afternoon, I began, my voice a little thin at first. My name is Alex Peterson, and I want to talk to you today about a hidden crisis: water contamination in our rural communities, and a sustainable solution I believe we can implement. As I delved into the science, the data, the core mechanics of my filtration system, a strange calm settled over me. This was my turf, my passion. I explained the complex algorithms, the locally sourced materials, the potential for initiatives. I could see a few heads nodding in the audience, some people leaning forward, scribbling notes. Even from the corner of my eye, I noticed my father's expression shift from detached boredom to a flicker of something else: surprise, interest. Then, as I moved towards my conclusion, I took a deliberate pause. But innovation, I said, my voice now firm, unwavering, doesn't happen in a vacuum. It requires not just an idea, but an environment where that idea can breathe, can be nurtured, can be protected. Sometimes, the greatest obstacles aren't technical, but deeply personal. I saw Jessica stiffen almost imperceptibly, Mom's smile falter. The air in the room suddenly felt charged, a subtle shift from academic discussion to something far more intimate, far more raw. I hadn't named names, not yet, but the prologue to my real story had just begun, and I knew they felt it. My gaze swept across the room, pausing infinitesimally, longer on the third row. Imagine, I continued, my voice now resonating with a quiet power. A young innovator, pouring her heart into a project, only to find her path systematically, almost invisibly, blocked. Not by lack of funding, or a flawed concept, but by something far more insidious. Imagine the tools of her creation, a presentation meticulously crafted, a prototype lovingly built, suddenly rendered useless, just days before her biggest opportunity. I saw Mom's hand fly to her mouth, Dad's face paling. Jessica sat ramrod straight, her perfectly composed mask beginning to crack at the edges. Imagine this innovator being told it was her own fault, her carelessness, or perhaps, a sign she wasn't meant to succeed. The words hung heavy in the air. For years, I lived that reality. I am that innovator. A collective gasp, soft but audible, rippled through the audience. This was no longer just about water filters. The accident that nearly cost me my place here today wasn't an accident at all. It was the culmination of a pattern, a series of carefully orchestrated mishaps designed to keep me small, to keep me in a box. My laptop didn't just die. Its demise was assisted, a sugary sabotage meant to look like incompetence. I didn't need to point fingers. The truth, raw and undeniable, was a spotlight brighter than any on stage, and it was now fixed squarely on them. Jessica looked like she'd seen a ghost, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Mom was openly weeping, Dad, staring blankly ahead, the picture of a man whose world had just been upended. The silence in that auditorium was absolute, a breathless void, before a single person started to clap. Then another, and another, until the room erupted in a wave of thunderous applause that felt like validation, like a collective roar of understanding. Through the roar, I met Jessica's gaze one last time, no longer the timid little sister, but a woman who had found her voice, even if it had to be on a global stage. This was my moment. This was my truth, and for the first time, it felt truly, unequivocally, mine. The applause eventually subsided, but the energy in the room remained palpable, thick with emotion. I saw my parents escorting a visibly shaken Jessica out through a side exit. Their usual confident postures replaced by a slumped, hurried retreat. They didn't look back. Later that evening, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Clips of my speech, particularly the more personal revelations, were already circulating on various social media platforms associated with the forum. #, innovator, speaks truth, and #toxic family no more. Liam texted me a link to an anonymous post on a popular student forum in our hometown, detailing a shocking revelation at a national youth conference that bore an uncanny resemblance to my story. The comments section was a wildfire of speculation and, surprisingly, a few messages of solidarity from people I vaguely knew back home, people who'd also felt the sting of Jessica's Golden Girl's shadow. Ms. Albright called, her voice brimming with pride. "Alex," she said, "what you did today took immense courage. You didn't just present an idea, you reclaimed your narrative. And it seems your narrative is resonating far beyond that auditorium." A local news outlet from Chicago, covering the forum, even reached out for a brief comment on the unexpectedly personal and powerful closing remarks. From an emerging ideas presenter, the ripples were spreading, and for once, I wasn't afraid of the waves. Asterisk, the days following the forum were a whirlwind, but a good kind. My inbox, once a source of anxiety, was now filled with messages from fellow innovators, potential mentors, even a couple of small tech startups interested in my water filtration concept. The emerging ideas showcase, which I'd initially seen as a last resort, had unexpectedly become my launching pad. One of the main forum sponsors, a well-known environmental foundation, reached out to discuss potential seed funding for my project, something I hadn't dared to dream of. It was overwhelming, in the best possible way. For so long, my world had been defined by the suffocating confines of my family's expectations and Jessica's manipulations. Now, standing on my own, having spoken my truth, it felt like I could finally breathe, truly breathe, for the first time. The city of Chicago, once a daunting symbol of a stolen opportunity, now felt like a landscape decisive of decisions and new beginnings. I found a small sunlit studio apartment I could afford with the initial grant money, a space that was entirely mine. No more walking on eggshells, no more hiding my successes, no more dimming my own light. This wasn't just about a project anymore, it was about building a life, brick by brick, on a foundation of courage and authenticity. The old Alex, the one who tiptoed around her sister's moods, was gone, and in her place, someone new, someone stronger, was slowly, but surely, emerging. Asterisk, looking back, the path here was paved with more than just hard work. It was paved with painful realizations. Asterisk, the biggest lesson, that sometimes, the people closest to you can be the ones holding you back the most. Not out of malice, but perhaps out of their own fears, their own unfulfilled dreams, or a twisted sense of love that manifests as control. Learning to see that, to acknowledge that truth without letting it consume me, was the hardest part. Another lesson, your voice matters, even if it trembles. For years, I allowed my voice to be silenced, my accomplishments to be overshadowed, but standing on that stage, sharing my story, I realized the power of authenticity. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my space, my truth. And finally, forgiveness. Not necessarily for them, not yet, but for myself, for the years I spent doubting my worth, for the times I didn't stand up sooner. That self-forgiveness is a quiet strength, the foundation upon which I'm now building everything else. The journey isn't over, not by a long shot, but now, I'm the one holding the pen, writing my own next chapter. It's been a year since that day in Chicago. My water filtration project, with the foundation's backing, is now in its pilot phase in 3 rural communities. And the initial results are more promising than I could have ever hoped. I'm leading a small team, learning every day, and yes, sometimes I still pinch myself to believe this is my life. Liam is here in Chicago too, on a scholarship he aced, and our late-night cookie-fueled strategy sessions now involve him complaining about his engineering professors. As for my family, I get occasional, hesitant emails from my mom. They're different now, softer. She told me once that the silence in the house after I left was deafening, that Jessica started therapy, and that Dad actually picked up one of my old poetry journals. There's no magical reconciliation, no fairy tale ending where everything is perfectly mended, because some cracks run too deep. But there's a fragile sort of understanding beginning to form, one built on distance and, perhaps, a little bit of hard-earned respect. I'm no longer waiting for their approval, but it's a strange, quiet comfort to know they're finally starting to see me, the real me. My focus, though, is on the future, on the communities I'm trying to help, on the life I'm building. It's a life filled with purpose, with challenges I choose, and with an unshakable belief in my own worth. So, I guess the question I'd leave you with is this. What walls, seen or unseen, are you ready to break down to build the future you deserve? Asterisk, that's my story, a journey I felt compelled to share, much like many brave individuals do on forums, such as our FamilySabotage, and it truly makes me wonder about all of you. So, the question I'd love to leave with you is this. What walls, seen or unseen, are you ready to break down to build the future you truly deserve? Share your thoughts, your own stories of resilience, or any part of this that resonated with you in the comments below. I genuinely read them all. If this story touched you or gave you a little bit of strength today, please show some love by giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming empowerment and finding your voice, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future uploads. You've got this, and thank you for watching.